Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, clearly taking that title quite seriously, is being accused of committing war crimes. This story came out from the Washington Post that has caused quite the stir, a bipartisan stir, I might add, with Republicans and Democrats furious and asking lots of questions. Is Pete Hegseth ordering the slaughter of survivors, people who are surrendering or survivors at sea after they've blown up the many boats that they've blown up? I believe at this point they've done about 11 strikes. They've killed over 80 people. This is the story that came out from the Washington Post over the weekend. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave a spoken directive, according to two people with direct knowledge of the operation. The order was to kill everybody, one of them said. Now, they're referring to the fishermen boats or the drug boats that have been struck off the coast of Venezuela. In fact, they've been struck kind of all over the place. There's been various different strikes. Let me actually show you where the strikes have been. This is where you could see the 5 strikes off the coast of Venezuela in one area, 1 strike to the right of that, and 2 strikes, most of them off the coast of Venezuela. You could see there 8 strikes in total right off the coast of Venezuela. 1 near the Dominican Republic and Cuba, another 4 strikes off the coast of Colombia, and 3 strikes off the coast of Mexico, killing over 80 people, apparently, in these various different strikes. The strike that they're talking about, the one in question, was from September 2nd, and it was an attack that had 11 people on a boat. The Department of War never gave any sort of, they never actually provided any evidence that the boat was containing drugs. They claimed that there was drugs. In fact, with any of these boats, they haven't actually been able to produce any of the evidence that the boats are carrying drugs. So this order was apparently September 2nd. Apparently 11 people on board. They struck the boat several times. They struck it once, twice, 3 times. Then after, there were 2 survivors hanging on to the side of a boat, and allegedly the video shows them then being blown up with another strike. That is my understanding, is that it was struck. It was a second strike that was essentially ordered. The first strike, it's really kind of confusing to kind of follow along. Maybe let's just go ahead and read a little bit more of this article, and maybe it'll kind of clarify it, because it sounded to me like there was actually multiple strikes in maybe the first round, and that's considered a first strike. And they did 3 different, actually sent 3 different projectiles down. And then they did another strike, a second strike that was ordered. But this is what it says. I didn't think it could happen to me, but just recently someone stole my information and actually bought a car under my name in Texas. While I was standing in the Idaho DMV getting my new driver's license, a thief was driving off the dealer lot pretending to be me. And I only caught it because I was getting bombarded with alerts. Now imagine if I hadn't seen them in time. And this is exactly why today's sponsor, Aura, matters. If you've ever wondered how scammers get your personal info, your phone number, your address, even where you supposedly work, it's because of data brokers. These shady companies collect your data and sell it to anyone, from marketers to scammers, and they make billions doing it. They don't ask your permission. And while they're legally required to remove your info if you ask, they make the process nearly impossible on purpose. Believe me, I'm going through it right now. But if I had Aura set up before, this thief would have had a much harder time. Aura automatically scans and scrubs your information from those data broker sites, and then it keeps it off. It also gives you real-time fraud alerts, so instead of finding out a day later that someone used your name, you get notified right away. That's the kind of tool I wish I had in place when all of this happened. But Aura is more than just removing your data from shady brokers. It's an all-in-one digital security app. It alerts you if your personal info is found on the dark web. It monitors your credit and bank accounts in real time. It gives you a secure VPN, password manager, antivirus, and more. And if something does happen, Aura covers you with up to $5 million in identity theft insurance and 24/7 US-based fraud support. The fact that companies profit off of our stolen data while we're left vulnerable is outrageous. I learned that the hard way. But I'm not leaving myself unprotected anymore, and you shouldn't either. Protect yourself and your family with Aura. Try it free for 14 days at aura.com/Kim Iverson. And in just 2 weeks, Aura will show you where your personal data is being exposed and start scrubbing it off the internet automatically. Again, that's aura.com/Kim Iverson. A missile screaming off the Trinidad coast, striking the vessel and igniting a blaze from bow to stern. For minutes, commanders watched the boat burning on a live drone feed. As the smoke cleared, they got a jolt. 2 survivors were clinging to the smoldering wreck. The Special Operations Commander overseeing the September 2nd attack, the opening salvo in the Trump administration's war on suspected drug traffickers in the Western Hemisphere, ordered a second strike to comply with Hegseth's instructions. 2 people familiar with the matter said the 2 men were blown apart in the water. So the 2 survivors were then struck a second time. Says the alleged traffickers pose no immediate threat of attack against the United States and are not, as the Trump administration has tried to argue, in an armed conflict with the U.S., these officials and experts say, because there's no legitimate war between the 2 sides. Killing any of the men in the boats amounts to murder, says Todd Huntley, a former military lawyer who advised Special Operations Forces for 7 years at the height of the U.S. counterterrorism campaign. Right, so the Trump administration's defense on this, before we get to the number of strikes, because I was under the impression that it was 2 strikes in total, but again, I don't know how many. I don't know how the military counts a strike. Does that mean 1 missile and then another missile, or is 1 strike multiple missiles? Because I was under the impression that there was actually multiple that were fired off the first strike round. I'm not really sure about that, but the White House is saying, "Look, we're at war with these drug traffickers." Previously, we've just arrested. We would see the suspected boats. We would then seize them, arrest them, and they would face due process. It's called law enforcement. But now they're waging war rather than just law enforcement. And it really does blur the lines of what is war and what is law enforcement. At what point does law enforcement become war? And if you blur the lines like this, where else can you blur the lines? If it's on these narco drug traffickers, then where else could you blur these lines when it comes to, hey, we are now saying you're declaring war on the country? You could see for sure in the future some sort of scenario where Democrats, for example, would say all of these J6 rioters, that took over, they're insurrectionists. All these J6 insurrectionists are waging war on the country. This is war. It's no longer law enforcement. So we can now impose martial law on these people. We can now kill them. It's war. This is a war. It's a civil war. It's no longer an act of just law enforcement. And the act of violence in and of itself, if there is violence, which these drug traffickers are not engaging in a violent crime, they're engaging in and we don't even know if there were drugs on the boat. For one, we don't even know if there were drugs on the boats. If there were drugs on the boats, we don't know exactly where the boats were going. Maybe they were just going to go to Mexico. Maybe they were going to Panama. I mean, we have no idea where these boats were headed. And even if they were doing all of those things, and even if they were headed to the United States, it's still not a violent crime. It's not waging war in the sense of armed conflict. That's what war is supposed to be, between 2 entities, an armed conflict. And all of these boats are not connected to the same organization. It's not like we've waged war on Tren de Aragua. No, we haven't. I mean, we have, but not really, because a lot of these boats are not even affiliated with them. These boats aren't affiliated with each other most of the time. So they're muddying the waters, and I think that's the real issue here to take into consideration is that, yes, do we want to stop the drugs coming into our country? Sure. But we probably should stop the demand. People wanting the drugs in our country would probably be the first thing to do. But beyond that, this is going to blur the lines of when does law enforcement become war? And are we okay with that line being blurred? You might be okay with that under President Trump. Are you going to be okay with that under President AOC? And that's the question we always have to ask ourselves. So the Washington Post goes on to continue saying, even if the U.S. were at war with the traffickers, in order to kill all the boat's occupants if they were no longer able to fight, would in essence be an order to show no quarter, which would be a war crime. The elite counter group SEAL Team 6 led the attack, according to 4 people with direct knowledge of the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity because of the ongoing sensitive operations. The commander overseeing the operation from Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley, told people on the secure conference call that the survivors were still legitimate targets because they could theoretically call other traffickers to retrieve them and their cargo, according to 2 people. He ordered the second strike to fulfill Hegseth's directive that everyone must be killed. So that's the inside knowledge. They're saying that this admiral, who then, by the way, committed a war crime, because that would be a war crime as well, that and he would be facing the same sort of war crime charges, that the admiral said, well, I'm fulfilling Hegseth's order to kill everybody, and they're not survivors because they could still sell drugs. I mean, that's the logic there. So if you're living and breathing, theoretically, you could commit any crime. And that's what they're trying to say is, well, and the problem with this logic also is that this causes a problem for wartime when the United States is at war and other countries are battling the United States. This logic could be applied against our own soldiers. So if a naval vessel gets blown up and there's survivors, the military of the other side is supposed to take in our survivors, and they would be then prisoners of war. But instead, this would set the new precedent of, well, but they could call another vessel and get help from more U.S. military, and we're at war with the U.S. military, so blow them up, kill them all. That's not the way it works, but it certainly puts our own men in uniform, our own men and women in uniform at risk of this new precedent that is being set. Goes on to say the protocols were changed because on October 16th, there was a strike in the Atlantic Ocean that killed 2, and another 2 men were then captured and repatriated to Colombia and Ecuador. So they do have, so after this strike happened, they must have, which makes you think they knew this was wrong when they did it. Because September 2nd, they do it, they kill everybody. Then in October, there was an emphasis in the change of protocol, which was to retrieve people and repatriate them. So, it's one of those, did they know? And obviously, I think they must have known that it was totally wrong. So Trump goes on to say about this, he says, earlier this morning on my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a kinetic strike against positively identified Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists in the Southcom area of responsibility. TDA is a designated foreign terrorist organization operating under the control of Nicolas Maduro, responsible for mass murder, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and acts of violence and terror across the United States and Western Hemisphere. The strike occurred while the terrorists were at sea in international waters, transporting illegal narcotics heading to the United States. The strike resulted in 11 terrorists killed in action. No U.S. forces were harmed in this strike. Please let this serve as a notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs in the United States of America. Beware. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So they wanted to send a message. And this was the tweet that he had sent out, that Trump had sent out on the morning of this strike. So clearly they wanted to send this message, and they meant to kill everybody on board. But that is a war crime, and that is the problem. This is what if you remember, this was the strike here. We don't have video of the 2 survivors clinging onto the boat and then being blown up. There is allegedly a video of this. And what has been said to the media is, well, if the public saw this video, they would be outraged. Okay, well, then we want to see the video. That's what we're going to want. We're going to want to see the video. Pete Hegseth comes, because we want to be outraged. We should be outraged. We should see what our government is doing. We should see what our military is doing, because we're just making enemies all around the world. Pete Hegseth says, as usual, the fake news is delivering more fabricated, inflammatory, and derogatory reporting to discredit our incredible warriors fighting to protect the homeland. As we've said from the beginning and in every statement, these highly effective strikes are specifically intended to be lethal kinetic strikes. The declared intent is to stop lethal drugs, destroy narco boats, and kill the narco terrorists who are poisoning the American people. Every trafficker we kill is affiliated with a designated terrorist organization. The Biden administration preferred the kid gloves approach, allowing millions of people, including dangerous cartels and unvetted Afghans, to flood our communities with drugs and violence. I don't even want to get into the Afghan issue. This is what happens when you wage wars. When you wage wars, this is what happens. You destabilize countries and the migrants come flooding in. The Trump administration has sealed the border and gone on offense against narco-terrorists. Biden coddled terrorists. We kill them. Our current operations in the Caribbean are lawful under both U.S. and international law, with all actions in compliance with the law of armed conflict and approved by the best military and civilian lawyers up and down the chain of command. Our warriors in Southcom put their lives on the line every day to protect the homeland from narco-terrorists, and I will always have their back, he says. Yeah, after you killed a couple of people, you're not supposed to be killing people, but he does it anyway. And he says, Pete Hegseth he's just a child. Honestly, this guy is a child, and he's in charge, and he's got guns now, weapons, and he's using them. And he says, we have only just begun to kill narco-terrorists. He then goes and posts this as well, saying, add this to your Christmas wish list this year. for your Christmas wish list, he says. And he shows this book, Franklin Targets Narco-Terrorists. This is how he envisions himself, I guess, as a mutant Ninja Turtle of some kind. Not really sure, but he is a total and complete child. Donald Trump, this is what he said about it when he was asked.
I don't know anything about it. He said he did not say that, and I believe him. You don't know the two men? The second strike. He said he didn't do it. He said he didn't.
Would you be okay with that if he did?
He said he didn't do it, so I don't have to make that decision.
I mean, basically, it's hard to hear, but basically he's sitting there saying, yeah, no, it's, Hegseth is fine. I support him 100%. So he just says, I don't know anything about it. He said he did not say that. The reporter says, you don't know if there was a second strike to kill the two men. And Trump said he didn't do it. And the reporter asked, would you be okay with that if he did? And Trump said he didn't do it, so I don't have to make that decision. But some Republicans are really not happy with this, and they are saying this is a war crime, and they plan to investigate it. Here is Republican Congressman Mike Turner, who serves on the House Armed Services Committee, and this is what he says about it. Let's find that clip here. This is what he says.
War experts are saying that was illegal, that killing people who are no longer able to fight is a war crime. What is your view, and what questions do you have for the Pentagon?
Congress does not have information that had occurred. Both the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, and ranking members have opened investigations. Obviously, if that occurred, that would be very serious, and I agree that would be an illegal act.
Okay. So, yes, a lot of Republicans are actually quite upset about this. Democrats are upset. This is bipartisan. They want to see some action. But let's get real about this. Nothing is going to happen to Pete Hegseth. Nothing is going to happen to Hegseth. Nothing is going to happen to the admiral who actually fired off the strike that killed these survivors. Nothing is going to happen to these guys. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. Should there be something, if there were charges that were actually brought against Pete Hegseth, then he could face the death penalty because people were killed, or he could face life imprisonment or a certain number of years in prison. But we all know that the precedent in this country has been war criminals get away with war crimes. And these guys know it. And so Pete Hegseth and Trump know they don't have to answer for the actions that occurred on September 2nd or any other time. Blowing up these boats and not providing any evidence of who's actually on the boats, whether or not there's drugs on the boats, not being forced to have Congress declare war against the narco-terrorist groups. When you declare war, there should be an actual armed conflict that is against the United States. We do not have an armed conflict coming from these groups against the United States. Are there criminals? Yes. Do criminals commit crime? Yes. Sometimes the crime is violent crime, but that is not a reasoning for war, a declaration of war. Otherwise, you could declare war on a lot of different groups in this country, and it will go both ways. It won't just be Republicans being able to declare war on the gangs of Chicago. It'll also be Democrats being able to declare war on the MAGA Trump supporters in the middle of Arkansas. So we got to be really careful with who we allow, what we allow to be war. Obviously, the war on drugs has not worked. And this war on drugs is likely also not to work. Drugs coming in by boat, okay, they know we can no longer be transporting the drugs by boat. So what are they going to do? They're going to transport them by land, which is, by the way, how most of the drugs are getting through anyway. So they're just going to change their tactics. This isn't actually deterring drugs. This isn't actually, there's no war that is being won here. It's just don't do it this way. Instead, transport them by land. And they will do it by land. And they'll still get the drugs in because there's people on this side of the border that are facilitating it. It's not just illegals bringing in the drugs. It's people on this side of the border, people in our own government, people in Border Patrol who are facilitating this because they're making a bunch of money. So we have to start attacking our own rather than all of these various boats. But that's not what this is about anyway. None of this is actually about the war on drugs or stopping drugs or any of these or these boats. This is about Venezuela and its oil, and we're going to get to that. But this is a meme I wanted to share with you. Iraq was about weapons of mass destruction. Here it is. It's really about oil. And Venezuela, they say it's about drugs when it's really always, and will be just about getting the oil. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.